Greetings, traveler.
Hey guys, and welcome to my third Rise of Shadows meta update video. If you've been keeping up with the meta, you know that Rogue was very dominant. That's what we talked about in the previous two videos. And the big change right now is that Blizzard has stepped in when we have seen the first round of nerfs. I say the first round because I do expect a second round to be on the way, but more about that in a little bit. So first, let's talk about how Blizzard balances the arena. There's two big ways in which that can happen. One is micro adjustments, the other one is bucket balancing or changes or however you want to call that. The micro adjustments is really targeted. They can say, oh, Rogue will just get less good cards now. Less bucket 1 cards, less bucket 2 cards. We're going to make it less likely that you have a bunch of, backstabs and saps, essentially. The other one, the bucket changes, is not necessarily targeted. It's more of a, well, this card wasn't in the right bucket, we are going to move it up. And the way that happens, well, there's once again two ways. Initially, cards need to be put into a bucket. But then after that, whether a card moves up or down is generally dictated by pick rate. So if a card gets picked a lot in a particular pack, that means it is probably quite a bit stronger than the counterparts it is being offered against, and therefore it belongs in a higher bucket. That is the Blizzard way of balancing the buckets. So those are the two things. Now, the bucket changes, the one where they just put cards in the place they think, or rather the public thinks they belong because it's based off pick rates. Those have happened for every class but Rogue, and here's why. Micro adjustments have happened for only Rogue. So none of the other classes have received any micro adjustments yet, and this is why we assume that a second wave is on the way. We assume that there are going to be bucket changes for Rogue. They didn't want to do everything in one go, just so they can say, oh, does this work, yes or no? Because if they use both at the same time, they're like, well, it's working, but which one is working? Or it's not working, but what is not working? So it's easier if you do one set of changes first and then another set of changes later. So the reason why we assume that a second wave is on the way is that there is still a big imbalance in the class win rates. I'll quickly pull up HS replay so you guys can see that at the time of making this video, there is still a big gap. We go over to Arena over here. Over here, you guys can see the win rates. Let me move that a bit here. You can see that there is still a giant gap between the first and last class. It's just that Rogue has dropped down quite a bit. Now you can see it's number 4, and Warlock is sort of the undisputed number 1 right now. Now, more about that in a little bit, how you should play Warlock, what the counter to it is, etc., etc. But first, this is probably not going to stand, right? They will do something about this before they let it evolve into a natural meta for the remainder of remainder of the season, I would say. So the assumption is that there will be bucket changes for Rogue specifically because Miscreant, right? Evil Miscreant, one of the problem cards, is still a little bit too low, and that there will be micro adjustments for the other classes, hopefully balancing it a bit more. Now, I'm not a fan of complete everyone has 50% win rate, but this is also, there's a 15% win rate difference between a warrior and a warlock right now. So I do assume that, something will be done about that. So essentially what that means is warlock will get less good cards and warrior will get more good cards, to put it in the simplest of terms. All right, so now that you guys have been filled in on that, you know how this happens, what's going on, and why we assume that another set of nerfs/buffs is on the way, we can get into, well, what is the meta right now? And what have I been working on? That's the purpose of these videos. You guys get some information on what I'm working on my stream and what I think you guys should do if you want to win. So we talked about Warlock a little bit here, about why Warlock is, or rather that Warlock is number 1. Why is that? Well, if you played back, I believe it's Mean Streets of Gadgets and when the Abyssal Enforcer came out. If you were playing at the time, you probably know why Warlock is doing well right now, because Abyssal Enforcer is not a rare card. It's quite common, and it's an incredible powerhouse. So Warlock just flows really well, mainly because of that card right now. I'll show you guys 2 Warlock drafts that I've done. I didn't want to play too much Warlock. It's more I did these mandatory drafts because I wanted to show you guys some Warlock decks, but I don't really enjoy playing something because it's super strong, unless the playstyle really speaks to me, but that is not necessarily the case here. So, as we can see, this deck had 2 Abyssal Enforcers. I'll move a bit here, right? 2 Abyssal Enforcers and 2 Blast Crystals. That's sort of the combo that really pushes Warlock, where, oh, if you play around Abyssal Enforcer, which is really difficult to begin with because it deals 3 is a really big threshold, especially because it leaves a 6/6 body behind. But even if you successfully play around Abyssal Enforcer, that generally means you're going to play a big minion, which is a target for Blast Crystal. So that's that really nasty trap they put you in. Is like, well, if you, especially if they have both in their hand, you can't win because you play a big guy, you get Blast Crystals, you spread, you get Abyssal. It's really nasty. So the way how I like to construct a Warlock deck, it's pretty similar to how I like to construct a lot of decks right now, is I really want to focus on that early game, make sure I don't get pushed off the board, and then have a bit of a dip in the mid game, and then have a strong finish here in the late game. So you see that this deck has 5 1-drops, and it's not an aggro deck at all. It's more of a control deck. But especially in this deck, these triple Possessed Villager worked out so well with double Evil Genius. Lackeys are still really useful, really strong. So still recommend you guys picking that up. And then to enable it, it's nice to get some 1-drops. So especially if you have life tap, don't be too worried about running out of cards. Pick those 1s, pick some 2s. You see that I don't have too many, right? Everything combined here, we have 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So that is a lot, but if you know you already have 5 1s, you don't have to go like pick 8 2-drops on top of that. So right now I had like 5 and 5. That can be 4 and 6. You don't have to have 10 as a number. It can also be 8 or 9 or 7. But preferably if you get good early game, I like to keep taking it. And then, of course, the first 2, maybe even the first 3 Abyssals, you sort of don't skip because they're so strong. And then I actually had a draft where I was offered 4 Abyssals and I skipped 1 because I said, well, this is just sufficient. The preferred playstyle is a bit more control-y. So something that's been surprisingly okay for me is our Nasi Broodmother. It's something that I also just don't like my opponents to see, because you see when the card is drawn. You get that free extra health, and there's a taunt in the hand. It's, you know, it's not really over. It's not even properly statted, but just the fact that you get 4 health in a meta where, you know, people are really trying to kill you fast because they know you're so strong in the late game when you have that health and you can play the Abyssals, etc. It's just been an annoying thing. So cards like Rotten Applebaum or Nasi Broodmother, this sort of random healing splashed in, just makes the deck that much more consistent when you don't randomly die to a hunter or a mage that had a fireball or so. Because you will take some phase damage as well by playing your own Abyssal Enforcer. So yeah, that's mainly it. You know, some taunt, some heal, some early game to keep you going. Scroll over again. You guys can pause the video and look at exactly, you know, what was in there. But this was a 12-win Warlock. A very balanced deck, as in it has everything that I would want it to have. Good enough early game, some removal, some late game, some taunt, some heal. Perfect. A Void Caller for a little bit of cheese. All right, moving on. So this was a deck. This is the deck where I actually skipped an Abyssal Enforcer. This one didn't go all the way. It went 10 wins, but yeah, it's always difficult to guarantee a 12er, even if you're playing a strong class. But if you're going to play, you know, if, you know, I just picked up Warlock, said, all right, let's play 2 Warlock drafts, and then, you know, we go 12 and 10 since the shift, the shift in balance. That's a pretty good class still, right? That's an average of 11 over the 2 runs we tried. Doesn't mean you're always going to get a really good deck, because I do feel like the deck was of high quality twice, but you are more likely to get a good deck playing Warlock than, say, a Warrior right now. So this deck as well, similar philosophy. Pick some 1s, pick some 2s to try and stay alive. Some single target removal in the Blast Crystal, some AoE in the Abyssals. Here I have 2 Shovel Fists at the end, just to make sure we're not running out of cards. I do think that you can get away with 1 Shovel Fist as well. That's no problem. Even 0 Shovel Fists, but then you probably want to have another big thing, just like a Boulder Fist Ogre. Because if your deck is just AoE removal and early game, it could be that if you play against a slower deck, you won't have enough threats to actually finish the game off with. So aside from the Abyssals as big guys, I like to have, 1 to 3 big guys to really close the game out with. So Shovel Fist, Boulder Fist Ogre, cards like that. All right, well, that's it for the Warlock. That is the meta right now. People love playing Warlock. So what is good against Warlock? Well, first of all, Rogue is not unplayable by now. You saw that it was still top 4. Rogue does get a lot more bad cards. I think I did 1 Rogue run since the nerf, and I got 6 wins out of it. So not as insane as previous, but, still got my backstab, still got my deadly poisons, 1 miscreant, and then a little bit of curve. A lot of it is just going face versus the Warlocks. Spread early before they can Abyssal, and then into their Abyssal turn. Got to be careful you don't give them the perfect Abyssal Enforcer, so preferably like to save, Divine Shields or 4+ health minions for that turn 7. So yeah, Rogue not unplayable, but definitely not on the Warlock's level right now. So, if it's in your pack and you don't like to play the other classes, don't feel like you can't play Rogue. Just know that before the nerf, you could sort of do whatever with Rogue and still be fine, because you'd get multiple miscreants. You just sit there, have infinite value, infinite tempo, and everything was working for you. Right now, you'll have a lot less value, and you'll be lucky to get multiple miscreants. So that's that's sort of the change that has happened in Rogue, in that you need to really commit towards one direction, which is a lot of the time I need to kill my opponent. I need to use my tempo tools to get ahead on the board and then actually finish the game, rather than just mess around and win because I have unlimited value. All right. Anyways, I am still a big fan of the Hunter. That comes as no surprise. Now, over the since the nerf, I've drafted 1 mid-range Hunter, or maybe this deck was like. Anyways, like we'll talk about the deck. This deck I drafted for sure after the Rogue nerf. So we'll talk about decks that I've drafted in that meta. This one went 9. It started off really strong, then lost to a Priest and a Warlock at the end to close the run. But 9 wins, definitely not too bad. A very, very nice counter to the meta, because if there are still rogues, if there are still rogues and there are a lot of Warlocks, that Hunter hero power is so good. You put so much pressure on the Warlock's health that the Abyssal Enforcer becomes a very, very double-edged sword for them. 3 extra damage to their face can be too much. So for those of you who didn't, see how to draft Hunter, you can look at my previous meta update, but I'll quickly cover it, not as in-depth. The numbers are still the same. I still like to get about 8 1 to 2 mana cards combined if I can. This deck might have had a little bit more. 1, 3, 4, like Direwolf's like half, right? So I won't count it here. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So a little bit lighter this one. But I think we make up with that, or we make up for that, because we have a high main double spec knight and Huhuran. So the way how this deck could have been a little bit better is turn 3 was a little weak. And that's probably why I had more 1 to 2 mana cards. Yeah, now I remember the draft. I was drafting this deck, and I noticed that I didn't get the Animal Companions this time around. I didn't get the Pixies for the strong 3-drops. So I ended up picking a bit more 1 to 2 mana cards. So my turn 3 could be a 1-drop and a 2-drop instead of a 3-drop. So that's just something you need to do in the middle of the draft. If you notice, I'm not getting enough of slot X, I need to make up for that with, slot Y and Z or whatnot. So in this case, we picked 1s and 2s to cover for turn 3. But other than that, the deck was pretty standard. It's still, well, it had quite some low rolls in it as well. We had a Mad Hatter and a Night Prowler. So still 9, pretty good, right? Getting some low rolls. But it has the things I want, right? If I pick Reach in mid-range Hunter, I like to have big Reach, right? Reckless Rocketeer, Gladiator's Longbow, big Reach. Reckless Rocketeer, you might say, well, you don't like Kill Command. Why do you like Rocketeer? Rocketeer is way cheaper than Kill Commands. You pay a premium for Kill Command. You pass Animal Companion and such. Rocketeer is way cheaper, and they have to deal with it. So it slows them down. You play it and you hero power, preferably on 8, and then they need to sink at least 2 damage or a removal spell into the Rocketeer, whereas Kill Command is just used up, it's gone. And then Gladiator's Longbow is also phenomenal reach, oftentimes just a Pyroblast for 7 mana. So super nice. Not going to cover Hunter too much, right? The Silence, super, super nice. If you can get 2 Silences, that's still very nice. Silence on an Applebaum, that's a 9 health swing, denying them. The 5 from the Applebaum itself, the taunt, and 4 from the Death Rattle, super huge. So still a huge fan of the Silences. All right, so that's it for the counter. Now, the other things I'm working on right now, and this is just, this is not so much meta dependent, it's a bit more fluff for those of you who like to keep up to date as to what I've been playing, what I've been enjoying. Because I'm sort of waiting for the next round of nerfs until, because then we're going to get the real meta after they balance it for another time. I assume that there's going to be one more set of nerfs, and then we're going to have that meta for at least a couple weeks before there's going to be any other micro adjust / bucket changes. So I'm sort of waiting for that one. So I'm just having fun playing the very off-meta classes and trying to make them work. So we'll quickly cover a couple of them. So we'll talk about Shaman, we'll talk about Warrior. I have not been enjoying Priest as much. I know it's doing well on the stats, but I feel like if you're a high win player, the stats don't always apply to you in exactly the same way. Maybe it's a playstyle thing. For me, there's still a bit too many rogues around for Priest to be good, because Priest is so dependent on landing the board, getting that Talon Priest, popping off with that the playstyle also just doesn't appeal to me. Because with Priest, it's a lot of, well, I sure hope they can't remove my thing, because if they do, you're relying on landing an Alchemist to heal for 5 on your guy. You're relying on your 2-drop to stick so you can Talon Priest it. I just don't like that whole playstyle. Anyways, because I noticed Priest was there and was up in the win rates and I hadn't talked about it yet. We'll cover Shaman first. So, do I think that Shaman is particularly good in the meta? No. Is it fun to try and make it work? And is it really good when it comes together? Absolutely. So, this is a 12-win Shaman I drafted, which is, I went in with a very, very specific plan, and I think that's one of the big problems when people draft off-meta classes. Same thing with Warrior, Shaman. I feel they lumped in the same category of terrible right now, where it's not, I still don't think they're top tier, not at all. But I think that the difference in the classes isn't as big as the stats indicate if you know how to draft them. And I think a lot of people just don't know how to draft Shaman or Warrior, and you get penalized very heavily for that if you draft just sort of whatever. Because I think both Shaman and Warrior need to do a very specific thing. So I draft a lot of early game in both Shaman and Warrior. We're going to get into that and get into why. But this deck wasn't super... Actually, it was pretty light. What am I talking about? I curve out at 5 and I have these 2 walking fountains. Anyways, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. No, 10, right? 10 1 to 2 mana cards. You saw in the Hunter deck that we had that number, but that was because we had a shortage of 3s. That's not the case here. We actually have a lot of 3s as well. So you can see that we really, really value being able to get on the board early. The reason being that I love getting 1 to 2 Bloodlusts, and then you just get on the board early and I just finish them. 4 mana 7/7s Flame Wreath Faces are premiums. Anything to get on the board early and starts dealing a lot of face damage is great. We talked about how Warlock is popular. If you can chunk them down before Abyssal Enforcer, it's pretty great. Now, you might say, why are these Walking Fountains in here if you're such an aggressive deck? I really like how Walking Fountain gives you a shot in the games where you don't pull your Bloodlust or you're not able to build a board like that. You'd be surprised at how often you can rebuild your board after you've been cleared if you use your Fountain in the late game, killing 2 things, and maybe your Fountain even survives that, depending on how far behind you are. You get to heal for a bunch so they can't race you, and you kill 2 things on the board, potentially 3 if your fountain lives. And that just gives you the breathing room you need to get a new board, start toteming a little bit. They don't have that big spread because playing Shaman, it feels really bad if you're off the board and they have a lot of little guys. Your totems will never stick, nothing works for you. It's just very awkward. So the fountains really give you that second chance where, okay, the first wave didn't work. We played a fountain, we recover the board, we start building again, and then maybe I'll pull my Bloodlust, or maybe I'll be able to build the board to use the Bloodlust that I had in my hand, but wasn't able to use pre-fountain. So that's basically it. In this deck, you don't really see something specific that I like to do with Shaman, but you'll be able to see it in this deck. This deck had 3 Jade Claws. I really, really like that right now. But if you're going to pick Jade Claws and Stormforged Axe as well, for that matter, be careful with your 3-mana cards, because Jade Claws, you have to count it as a 3-drop when you're drafting your curve. Another very specific thing. You see that this deck had Walnut, Razorfen, and Amalgam, and Walnut is hardly a 3. So 2 3-drops plus 3 Jade Claws. It also means that when you have these 3 Jade Claws, pretend like they're not a 2-drop when you're drafting your curve. Because ideally what you want to do is coin 2-drop into Jade Claws into 2-drops, so that you still need a whole lot of 2-drops to make that curve work. This deck even had Patches, because I think the pick was Patches, Meixna, and Rathion, I think it's called, the one that draws you a card. And it was like, well, I just don't want that 6-mana card, man. Give me the Patches. And it worked out quite well. I had an Amalgam and a Bloodsail Raider and Spirit of the Murloc as well, I believe. Yeah, it's Soul of the Murloc, it's called. So the Patches providing an extra body for Soul of the Murloc and then giving us more chance for a Bloodlust to land was very fun. You see this deck did not have Walking Fountain. Maybe the reason it didn't, well, I mean, Shaman going 12 is pretty unusual, so a 9-win Shaman's still pretty good. But then we have a Shovel Fist instead of a Fountain. Not quite as good, comes down a turn later, does not have Wind Fury, does not have Lifesteal. Quite some factors why Burley is not as good as a Walking Fountain, but it gets a similar-ish job done. Overall, this was really not that great a Shaman deck, right? We had to draft a Muckmorpher as well. There were no Walking Fountains, and you know, but it had a really good plan in the early game where coin 2-drop into Jade Claws into 2-drop. Super nice curve. All right, so that's it for the little bit of fluff for Shaman. Let's talk about a little bit of fluff for Warrior. So I have not had a 12-win Warrior yet. Yesterday, I rage drafted Warrior a little bit. I wasn't really feeling well and I went super, super aggressive, but we'll cover the Warlock. We'll cover the Warrior run that wasn't rage drafted. This one went 10 wins, so until the nerf hits or the next balance update, or whatever you want to call it, I'll probably just be having fun drafting the off meta classes, because I don't really like playing classes when they're super strong. But there's nothing wrong with that, right? It's just because I play a ton that it's not so challenging then, right? But if you don't play as much as me, you know, enjoy Warlock being OP, get that extra gold, get that extra average if you're doing leaderboards. Absolutely nothing wrong with it. It's a personal thing. Anyways, on to the Warrior deck. This one went 10 wins. Started off 0-2, so close one there. Went 0-2 to 10-3. And it has this interaction that I really, really like right now. You saw me drafting lots of Jade Claws in the Shaman, 4 Woodcutter's Axe in the Warrior. I think that early 2 damage, you know, people draft 3 2s again. A lot more 2-drops in general. It's just good. Being able to ping 2 damage twice for 1 card and 2 mana is a good thing. Now, if you're going to draft the Woodcutter's Axe anyway, pick every rush minion you see early. We got triple Rabbit Worgen as well, and a Swift Messenger. So great synergy. I love doing that. You might say, okay, well, that's all nice and well. I get this early rush stuff, but how do I actually win? It's by being very aggressive, same as with the Shaman. If the average card quality of your class is a lot lower than, you know, what you're trying to beat, don't try to extend the game too long. I don't think we had a Reaper in this deck, but we had a Deathspite for reach. Oh, a Tiger. I remember like an increment of 5, right? But yeah, so I had a Tiger and I had a Deathspite. Tiger's sort of reach because it's stealth, and if they don't have a taunt, you can connect. You can see not that much late game. 1 Heroic Innkeeper, which was surprisingly useful in this deck. Probably because we were so aggressive and on the board. I wouldn't recommend drafting it, but then again, it's in a super low bucket, so maybe it's just the best card. 2 6-drops, don't want more than that. So you can see that it's a pretty low curve, lots of 2-mana cards. If we include the axes, let's see how many do we have. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 10. So once again, 10. So the funny thing is when I'm drafting these decks, I don't like super consciously go like, okay, I need 10 cards. I more just draft, then look at the results later, and that's how I come up with the numbers I want. So it seems that when the class is still better, 8 is sort of fine, you know, for the hunters, for the warlocks. But when I am faced with a lower tier class and I try to close out the games a bit faster, it seems that I end up with 10 1 to 2 drops now. Those are the things that I analyze a bit more for my meta reports. So I'll have more drafts and I'll investigate it a little bit more thoroughly than just these observations. But once again, we're in the fluff part of the video. This is more me thinking out loud and giving you guys a glimpse of, you know, what I'm working on. Yeah, that's basically it. Just lots of early game curve and hit them in the face. Early game, you still go for board control, of course, but then afterwards, get some smork in there. Yeah, guys, that's it. That's what I'm working on right now, and I will probably not release another meta update until the nerfs are in. Probably just another quick update after the nerfs are in, a couple days in if I know what works, and then I'll just work on a proper meta video for you guys. All right, hope you enjoyed this. Let me know in the comments if you'd like me to keep this up and, you know, just keep making these videos for every meta. Like and subscribe if you haven't. All right, guys, see you next time.